I've got to admit, I have been falling a tad bit out of love with using epoxy resin, because between the gearing up, the mixing up, the waiting 24 hours to see your project only to find it full of bubbles, it was getting a little old. But I have been introduced to a new magical tool that changes everything. You're going to hang out with me while I see if this is all that it promises to be. I just made a rhyme and I didn't even mean to. Anyhow, I have had these silicone molds sitting around collecting dust because I couldn't figure out a way to cast epoxy resin in them without a million bubbles. But I have been assured if I just use this one tool, my life will change. I'm going to take you through using it for the first time ever, and you can see the results with me. So let's get started. I'm just going to experiment today with some of these globe round silicone molds that I've been dying to play with. And I've also got this cool square mold and these colored skeleton leaves. And I've also got some real dried flowers that I'd love to incorporate into some of my little globes. But you know, flowers and leaves are so porous, and porous objects create bubbles. So my first thought, and no, this isn't the magic, this is just a trial and error test I thought of. If I coat them in some UV resin first, they'll have a nice seal or a nice coat on them, and maybe that porousness of them, is that a word? I don't know. Maybe that will seal all of those little air pockets where the bubbles develop. So the first thing I'm going to do is take some UV resin and give my leaves a good coat of it. Cure them under the lamp. And you can see that there is kind of a nice coating of UV resin. There's still holes, but that's okay. I think this will help with some of my bubble issues. And I've also got this UV dipping concoction. It's basically UV resin, but it's a little bit thicker. And so I'm going to dip some of my dried flowers in there just to also seal those up before I put them in my globes. If you want to know more about UV resin, I have lots of videos making UV resin products, so just be sure to go back and watch those. We're going to focus on epoxy resin in this video and using our new magical tool. You know that I love Resinair's product. I have their air purifier, which I always have running in my art studio, and they have a new and improved Airless Pro bubble removal machine. I have never used any of these, not even the old ones. This will be my first bubble removing machine. In the box you're going to find detailed instructions, and they even offer a warranty. They also include several measuring cups, and this plugs into a regular outlet, and of course your bubble removal machine. And when I first was looking at this, I was a bit intimidated, but it is super easy, simple to use. It comes with the canister that you put your resin in and a top and a plug. That's it. It's basically a vacuum, a high-powered bubble sucking vacuum. Now that I've read the directions, it is time to start mixing up our epoxy resin. Today I'm going to be using Counterculture's Artist Resin. It's a medium viscosity, but we're gonna mix up 4 ounces. It's 1-to-1 ratio, so 2 ounces of part A and 2 ounces of part B. You wanna mix that thoroughly until all of the little stringy bits are gone and it's one clear product. But look at how many bubbles are in this resin. There's no amount of heat that I'm going to be able to get rid of all these bubbles when I'm cast pouring my resin. All right, it's time to put this to the test. I'm also going to take a piece of parchment paper and put in the bottom of my bubble machine in case I spill over. So I've discovered you shouldn't put more than 2 ounces of resin per these sized cups. These are like 8-ounce cups. You can put up to 3 of these cups in, but I'm just putting 2 in. There's a little silicone pressure plug in the back. Make sure that that is in. You just hit the start button, and I'm going with 5 minutes because this is a medium viscosity. You can do 5, 10, or 15 minutes depending on your resin, but you can stop it at any time. And then you just sit back and watch the miracle happen. It will expand. So don't go above the 2-ounce line with your resin in these cups. And when you get to the end, you're still going to see there's bubbles on top. But when you release the plug, look, poof, it's magic. I have never had clearer epoxy resin than this. Let's hope it lasts. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop some of my little UV covered dried flowers into one of these small globe casting molds and pour my beautifully clear bubble-free resin in there. Now, I realize that whenever you put objects in your resin, you're going to create bubbles. I'm hoping to have a whole lot less bubbles. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to mix up one without using the bubble machine and pour it in so that we have a side-by-side comparison. And I'm also going to pour my layer where my leaves are going to go. Look at how smooth and clear this is. I mean, I'm kind of excited because I've never seen anything like this. I didn't honestly think these machines would work this well. So I'm kind of impressed. You are supposed to pour slow to help not introduce too many more bubbles back in after you degas it, but I didn't pour very slow, and I've got some bubbles along the edge. I'm just going to use my lighter and try to pop some of these bubbles. And now I'm going to settle my leaves in there. Of course, there are going to be a few bubbles floating around them because it's just the nature of the beast. But I think adding that UV resin coating helped. You could even spray them with like an acrylic sealer beforehand, and that might help too. And I'm kind of surprised how few bubbles there are. All right, now we're gonna mix up our second batch. Look at all those bubbles. I am not going to de-bubble this one. I'm not putting it in the machine. I'm just gonna pour it into the mold. Gonna try to use a lighter to see if I can get some of those bubbles to pop. And as it cures, some of them will also release, but I just wanna have a side-by-side comparison to validate my feelings on the bubble machine. Now that my coaster has cured enough to pour a second layer, I decided I'm going to try to mix up some epoxy and add a little bit of epoxy resin ink to it. I'm just going to add 2 drops each. Now, I have not seen anyone put colored resin into their bubble machine, so I'm not sure this is a good idea, but I wanted to try so that I know and that you know if it's possible. I mix that in and then put it in my machine. Again, not going over that 2-ounce line because you can see how much it expands when it's degassing the bubbles. Okay, that was a close call on that one. And then pull the plug and watch all those bubbles release. Now you can always run it again for a couple of minutes if you didn't get all your bubbles out. But look how pretty this color is and how clear it is. I'm in love. I'm trying to pour slower this time so I don't introduce any more bubbles, but this already looks amazing before I even demold it. So this dye did work at 4 drops. However, I attempted to put like double the amount of drops in, and this is what happened. So add pigment at your own risk. I'm just saying. Now that my projects are fully cured, I'm going to demold them. Wow, I cannot believe how clear this is. I have a few bubbles along the edge, and I see a couple little ones next to my leaves. But overall, I've never got this clear of a casting project ever. This is gonna make playing with epoxy resin fun again. Now let's pop our little globes out. First, I'm gonna pop out the one that sat overnight and cured that I did not take the bubbles out of with the machine. And you can see it is full of little bubbles. And now let's take out the ones where I used the machine. Look at the difference. Now I can see there's some bubbles hugging my flowers, but there aren't a bunch floating throughout the globe. Huge difference, huh? And here's some little tiny ones I poured with my extra resin. And I even poured a little heart pendant with dried flowers that I hadn't put in UV resin just to see. And one tiny little bubble at the edge, but other than that, it's really clear and really pretty. But I'm not quite done with my coaster. I really like the way it looks, but I think if I put a black background on it, maybe it'll pop a little more. My husband said don't do it, but I went ahead and did it because I'm just experimenting today anyway. What do you guys think? Did I make a mistake? And guess who stole my coaster and put it on their desk last night? Who didn't like the idea of me putting black on it? My husband. And if you're into epoxy resin casting, you might want to consider getting one of these bubble get rid of machines. And I only have experience with this one, but heck, I'm sold. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And I hope that I have inspired you to create something too. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time.